I'm Michael and welcome to Education Policy Matters. Today we're analysing the National Student Wellbeing Program, the funding model for school pastoral care services and wellbeing initiatives. Joining us, former pastoral support worker James Lenegas, who has seen the importance of pastoral support workers in schools.
Having someone who is available, but also brings in outside resourcing and connections is just invaluable.
Join us as we unpack the National Student Wellbeing Program, because education policy matters. A federal government policy, the NSWP funds wellbeing support for students in approximately 1 in 3 Australian schools. Effective January 2023, it replaces the 2006 policy, the National School Chaplaincy Program. Federal Education Minister, the Honourable Jason Clare, says that good mental health and wellbeing have a significant impact on young people's engagement with education and their learning outcomes. Part of the solution? Today's policy. As a federal funding agreement, each school receives approximately $20,000 to fund pastoral support staff to carry out wellbeing initiatives through pastoral care services or other services such as breakfast clubs. These staff must meet minimum qualifications and participate in cyberbullying prevention professional development. James Lenegas was a pastoral support worker in SA government schools.
I can think of a couple of schools particularly where pastoral care workers have brought in the Comochi's program. Their bullying data and attendance data would show that there was a really significant change in the school because of the pastoral care worker being a leader, but then also having a really big and meaningful impact.
The policy is not intended to provide religious instruction to students, nor specialist services to schools, such as psychology services. It's designed to run in parallel with specialists. Some disagree with the funding model.
The general pushback is always that schools need qualified counsellors or they need qualified psychologists on site, and this funding would be put to better use. But if you, let's say, have $20,000 for your school, it's not going to get you a whole lot of counselling sessions, certainly not many psychology sessions for your school compared with a lot of pastoral care work.
Research shows each school has contextual factors. Thompson calls it thisness. Herbert's research recognised educational policies that succeed in one context can fail in another. In contrast, the NSWP is excellent. It's adaptable to each school's context. Principals have autonomy for their site's unique needs.
Pastoral care workers are in schools of 10 students and they're in schools of 2,000 students. And so, every school is going to be very different for how they might spend their time.
2018 and 2022 reviews found the policy's predecessor effective. Principal requests for greater funding were rejected. ABC reported the new policy is having an agenda of removing chaplain in the title to broaden the scheme to non-religious staff. Funding arrangements for implementation vary by school sector. Here in SA we have 3 sectors: Catholic, independent and government schools. Each sector handles funding, and it raises the question, would it be better if the funding could be allocated directly from the Commonwealth Government to schools? Government schools can use external service providers to deliver NSWP services, one being Schools Ministry Group. James says partnering with organisations like SMG brings benefits.
Providing a wider network, but also the required training and support. It's the only way you can make that type of thing happen.
Schools Ministry Group seeks out grants and undertakes fundraising to increase the funding available.
If the school had to facilitate that $20,000, I don't know what they would get, what they would really achieve as far as staffing goes.
An Adelaide independent school interviewed said the NSWP funding does not cover the salary for pastoral care services and the school funds the shortfall. All Australian education ministers developed this policy, having received significant feedback from education departments as well as organisations such as SMG. The NSWP's strength is that schools' core funding can be allocated to teachers being in the classroom, supporting Zingia's research that students operate well in small class sizes. In Australia, state governments have responsibility and regulate school education. Using constitutional powers, the Commonwealth ties payments of grants to the states to implement certain education policies. In 2010, the federal Labor-Rudd government engaged David Gonski to review Australia's school funding. Ultimately, Gonski 2.0 was implemented in 2017 by the Liberal government. This created a stronger link between Commonwealth funding and agreed national initiatives. The NSWP is an example of this, as the funding is tied to cyber safety PD. Gonski reviewer Ken Boston observed that the issue in low-performing schools is not the quality of teachers in these schools, but the magnitude of the task that they're facing. This shows the importance of wellbeing support for teachers and students. Dr. Hinz has also identified that politicking and game playing will continue for a long time yet with different levels of government. Wellbeing needs to be above politics. Positively, as the funding is set per school, only varying sensibly for remote communities, this meets Andrew Dowling's ideals that funding should be consistent and clear. Commonwealth NSWP funding is $61 million annually, not indexed to inflation, causing implications for future funding. Whilst guaranteed until mid-2027, certainty in future funding is essential. The federal student wellbeing boost policy emerging, supporting schools to respond to the impact of the COVID pandemic, recognises shortfalls in current funding arrangements. In one school without NSWP funding I've worked at, teachers and other school staff had to take on the additional workload of wellbeing support for students. With 2/3 of Australian schools not accessing NSWP funding, I hope this changes. Maybe Australia is following an international trend where the complex setting of school life means that schools that are charged with enacting a wide range of policies may have to prioritise what they do, as per Maguire, Braun and Bull's work in English schools. So if you work at a school, speak to your business manager or principal to make sure your site is receiving funding from the NSWP. I recommend funding to be increased by inflation, reducing likelihood of staff hours decreasing over time. Ongoing commitments by the government to fund post-July 27 needs to occur, and where possible, increases to overall funding to reduce schools bearing the cost of the current shortfall.
Attracting people who actually want to work for minimum wage, where they have to have minimum qualifications and all that sort of thing, is really difficult, but it generally attracts the right people.
If pastoral support workers could be funded full-time, more students could be benefited and better candidates could be found for the roles. So there it is, the National Schools Wellbeing Program. Many benefits for school communities in a fair and equitable manner, but all in all, adjustments to the funding are needed. It's excellent to see the reviews showing that it's supporting the wellbeing of students and school communities. A big thanks to our special guest, James Lenegas, and thanks to you, because education policy matters.